one thing that the ATF is authorized to do is disband.
You know, the right to bear arms is because that's the last form of defense against tyranny, not to hunt. It's to protect yourself from the police.
Not only no gun control, but, we're going to destroy the whole concept because the internet's going to serve guns.
And we want our rights, and by God, we're going to keep them, come hell or high water.
The eMilitia Podcast, Episode 64, The Constitution of No Authority, Spooner with a Sarkist. Enjoy, fuckers.
I see. We've never done that kind of show where everyone else does that. They just have a casual conversation going, and then it melds into it, and that's so classy. And we're always like, "Oh, it's going. Fuck. Hello.
Oh, we're on. Oh God.
Yeah.
Where are my pants?
Yeah. No, we don't wear. Take them off. Take them off. Relax. Sit down. Hello, and welcome to the eMilitia Podcast. I'm BR, and today I'm joined by my co-host Small Crimes, aka Mel. Yeah, you've got so many names now, dude.
I know. I've been sticking to this username.
I know. I appreciate that. It helps me. And today we're going to be discussing the Constitution, that old relic that everyone has a soft spot for. And we're joined by a very special guest, very special guest, Asakist. That's my Euro trashiness getting in the way of my accent.
Hello, everyone.
Joining us to tear out a new one and to go over some Lysander Spoonerisms and generally take a modern look at the whole thing. We've got a lot of disaffected conservatives right now, kind of second guessing this whole thing. There's a new wave of them every few years, so
Good, very good.
Yeah, welcome. We're gonna hurt your feelings a little bit, but
Indeed.
But long term, hopefully, you'll thank us for this. So welcome to the show, man. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. It was great meeting you at Childerberg too.
Yes, I was like, when we first talked about this, I was like, all right, I don't want to record the episode and then sit around the fire with Ace. I want to do we got to do things the right way. So
Right, yeah.
That was cool to meet everyone in person, see they're real people. I'm not just being occupied or kept busy by bots, unless you're all very convincing federal agents. Which
right. There's always that possibility.
Yeah, I'm not ruling anything out, but
yeah, no.
I don't think the federal government has the kind of budget to keep agents as entertaining as the cast at Childerberg. So
that's a good point. That's a good point. I think we can rule it out now.
Yeah, they're simply not creative enough.
I think maybe Ace, you talked about it once, but feds were having trouble infiltrating anarchist groups because anarchists are too big of nerds.
Yeah. There was some report filed by some federal agency. It might have been the FBI. I don't remember at this point, but it was talking about how it was so hard to break into these anarchist groups because they read so much theory, and then they question new people on the theory, and then they ostracize the people who aren't up to date on the theory. So it was so hard for these agents to actually break into the anarchist cliques. It was really funny.
Not only
if you go look at Sorry, go ahead.
Not only do you need to be an expert on theory, but you also need to have a D&D character set up.
Right.
You need to be able to DM probably. You need to have know your Myers-Briggs type. There's so much shit you have to get, and in the end, it's that's not worth it. These guys are just fucking autistic idiots anyway.
That's right.
So it's working.
Yeah. Yes. The plan is coming together.
The code is too hard to crack.
Yeah.
So if you look at Ace's Twitter account and you think a Fed could pull that off, you have way too much faith in government.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, that's true. You have an omnipotent view of government if you.
So for all of our Instagram people who aren't over on Twitter, and I highly advise you go over there, if only to see Ace at work. Thank you. It's always a pleasure. No matter what time you log on, it could be 3 a.m. You'll see him debating with someone and kicking their ass on theory from every faction of the political universe, from Republicans to ANCOMs to I guess Gen Z neocons. That was the most interesting one to date.
Yeah, that was certainly something.
Did you see? You must have seen it. Someone shared them rebranding their profile picture, a rainbow flag in the background.
I did. Yeah, that was. Yeah, I have no words, to be honest. I'm thinking about what you just said. I'm thinking about the fact that they did that, and it's just like nothingness. Just the void is coming to mind.
Dude, I just more and more resign myself to the quiet, ugrous lifestyle these days. I'm like, I don't even know anymore. Everything's on fire. This is fine. I just look out the window and I'm like, yeah, of course that exists. Whatever, man.
Yeah, of course. It's like, oh yeah, hey, how you doing? Okay, well, you're now not going to be thought of ever again. All right, bye. That's sort of how you have to approach these things.
It's just part of the political void we're living in. It's
that's right.
The factions are so irrelevant.
If you were to ask me, like, oh, who is the person you enjoyed like debating the most on Twitter? It's like I don't even remember these people's names, to be quite honest with you. It's like they're all the same person and no one simultaneously.
I hate you. I don't even know who you are.
That's right.
Just crush someone's whole political existence with like a few quotes. It's like, huh? Did I ever talk to you?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
No, see me, Ace. So, speaking of this fucking chaotic void we all exist in these days, how did you come to find it? How did you bury yourself in this mess we all drag ourselves back to every single day?
Well. So I was always my family. I don't want to say my family's political because they're not, but my family are very much like dyed-in-the-wool Republicans, and because of that, they always used to have Fox News on like all the time in my house every day. And I remember not really liking or jiving with like Republican beliefs or anything like that, but I knew I wasn't like a Democrat either, technically. But then I found this guy who was on Fox News by the name of Judge Andrew Napolitano. And he had a lot of really crazy beliefs, I thought at the time, and a lot of really interesting beliefs that I had never considered before. And he was kind of my inroad into libertarianism at the time. And then through him, I was introduced better to people like Ron Paul, and then introduced to Tom Woods, Michael Malice. Through there, I like joined Twitter just to kind of stalk Michael Malice's account. Or I didn't join Twitter, but I lurked Twitter to stalk Michael Malice's account. And I actually found a bunch of like Liberty Twitter through Michael Malice's like replies and stuff like that. And I found Pete Quinones through that. And then I kind of found like the quote unquote like in-group, what people in the in-group would refer to as the in-group from Pete Quinones's Twitter. So it kind of all spiraled from there. And here I am.
Damn, that's a pretty direct route. You didn't have some kind of like awkward, pubescent phase of the LP or anything.
No, I was never. I would never consider myself like an LP person. To be honest,
lucky man. And you didn't do any of the, I mean, clearly you didn't do any of the. Or I guess a better question would be, you weren't interested in any politics prior to kind of being like, oh, this is different.
Right, yeah, I was never a political person. No, I've never been involved in politics. I've never voted in my life.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's why he's so base, people. He maintained all of his power by never giving it to anyone else.
I kind of realized all of it was like kind of bullshit from a young age, and it's kind of been a consistent trend.
Yeah. It's funny that we're this episode we're gonna be focused on Spooner because of course just brushing up on it. And him talking about the various ways that we, are supposedly consenting to this whole thing. And he goes on about voting not being a clear way to consent. And it's like, he goes into it, well, it's clearly not a clear way to consent because some people are just trying to be robbed less. And it's like, damn, that's where I fucking was, like voting for, Brexit when I was back in the UK and voting for like a conservative government as a British gun owner. I was like, yeah, this'll fuck me less. You were surrounded by wolves. Seriously,
British gun.
I still absolutely am, but they were a lot fucking closer.
Right, yeah. And I mean, just to jump on that for a second, it's like, just imagine if like an analogy I used to really like hit that point home is like, if you're on a plantation, if like you're a slave on a plantation, let's say, right? Obviously if the master somehow wants to be benevolent for like some reason and says, okay, I'm going to let you choose who the person who is going to whip you is, right? And one person's going to whip you less, one person's going to whip you more, or they might just whip you differently and you might prefer one or the other, and then people choose one or the other. It's obviously not consenting to be whipped. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's obviously not consent.
Yeah, it's insane that people will die on a hill so epically, and we see this in every single debate you have, because that's what it comes down to. It's like, do you really consent to this violence? It's like, well, yes, but no, but maybe, and you just see them struggling and falling over themselves. It's like, dude, I'm like honestly not trying to make an idiot of you unless you're willing to do that themselves. That's kind of like the common theme of your things. It's like, well, how about this proposition? And then they just fucking die on a hill for something that's nonsensical and like self-harming most of the time. And you're like, well, here's the stuff, man.
Yeah, my favorite thing to do on Twitter is to get people into kind of like corner them into their own positions, like the logical conclusions of their own positions, and I want them to come face to face with that in real time, and I want to watch them do it.
Yeah, it's always consistency, because that's the one thing I'm sure all of us have found to be the biggest relief with anarchism and libertarianism leading into anarchism is that
I don't have to believe anyone's bullshit.
You're finally free of those inconsistencies, which I guess as you were coming to anarchism, did you find you were like fighting those off, or were you just like, no, this all makes sense because it was a pretty steep slip as you were learning? Like, yeah.
So originally, when I was first getting into libertarianism, I'm kind of the way I approach like any type of like belief system is I'm kind of a skeptical person, where I try to, whenever someone offers me a proposition, my first thought is, okay, how can I poke holes in this? How can I see why this is wrong? And I actually came to libertarianism by realizing, oh, logically, this is really strong. Like, this is really consistent and this is really strong. And then eventually I'm like, okay, once I got on board, I'm like, okay, now all I have to do is just follow it to its logical conclusion, which was anarchism, right? So that's kind of like, how I went there, like step by step, logically, I guess.
Yeah. Was there any issues that like you really struggled with, or was it just kind of like, okay, no, I understand like the use of force and stuff?
I mean, there were like these outlying cases that I eventually like got settled, or I had a fairly good idea. Like, can you sell yourself into slavery? There's like all these like wacky, like way out there things, that are just like kind of bugged me originally. But then I found convincing answers that I enjoyed, or that I thought were consistent and I approved of, type thing.
Yeah, that's a much more fulfilling way to kind of come into this ideology, to like chase down the obscure weird shit that are like, okay, I'm mostly sold, but what about this outlier? Oh no, there is an answer for that.
Right, yeah, that's exactly how it kind of was for me.
See, that's and I think that's what probably makes you like such a strong debater, because those were the final issues. Whereas for a lot of people, including myself, a lot of people who maybe also came from like a Republican conservative kind of family or background, but accidentally managed to plug into it for a few years. The last few things they're hung up on is like some of the most obvious anarchist things, like police and military, and you're sitting there with your arms crossed, like, well, I don't think the government should do any of this, like long shopping list of various niche things, and you're like, but the military and police, it's essential for that, and you're like, no, dude, please.
It's like conservatives, we want a very small government, but we want the government to handle the most important social functions you could ever possibly imagine.
Right? We want them to have the absolute monopoly on force everywhere it matters in our life, but I don't want them in any other part of my life.
Yeah, I don't want them to make my shoes, but arresting me for weed, oh yes, please.
I don't want them to force me to bake the cake, but they can have that big old standing army,
That's right.
So I guess that kind of brings us into the hang-ups with the Constitution, and your misattributed quote now. The Constitution is a gun-free zone sign for conservatives or Republicans or whichever of the many iterations and variants of it there are at this point. I think even it was the Mises Caucus that just retweeted it an hour before we were recording.
They did.
But they said is a gun-free, for the right. I was like, okay, well, that's broad. But
all these are fine to me. I'm like, that works too. Yeah, anything. Yeah.
Yeah, because we see so many people who like they'd probably be gunning down this rabbit hole we've all found ourselves down if they didn't have the convenient excuse of, oh well, our government just needs to revert back to the Constitution and everything would be like dandy. That would just solve everything.
It's like, man, if everything was nice, wouldn't everything be nice? It's like,
man. That's a really good point. I'd never thought about it that way.
Right.
God damn it.
Right.
Like, that's always my biggest pain if I'm at the gun store and some guy seems to be having some kind of like pretty decent oh yeah, the government. I'm like, yeah, man, yeah, trying to like just poke and prod, and they'll be like, yeah, I just wish they'd listen to the Constitution. I'm like, yeah, okay.
Right. And you know, what bugs me is that, you know, I grew up around conservatives, and it's like, you know, conservatives, at least, you know, to some degree, at least I think better than the left, understand like market incentives. They understand that people usually, generally, not always, but generally work better when they have an incentive to work better,
Yeah.
you know. But when you talk about the Constitution, we're talking about a document that these conservatives believe is supposed to regulate the Constitution. They believe it's supposed to, you know, hamper them or put a roadblock in their way in some way. The Constitution is interpreted and enforced monopolistically by the very people it's supposed to regulate. So there's no possible incentive there. Like, what incentive do they have to hurt themselves? You know what I mean? Because that's what you're asking them to do. You're asking these power-hungry people to put a limit on their own power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's. I mean, again, this is gonna be a Spooner-heavy episode, so it's just, like Spooner said. But I mean, you can't be someone's public servant and also their master that you can't, you know,
Right.
like not serve or say like, nah, I'm not cool with that, so I'm not gonna do it. You can't do that because you'll be put in a cage or killed or otherwise punished in some way with violent coercion. So there's no opt out. He's not my servant. He's my master. So
of course, yeah.
So the Constitution being this lofty solution is just moot.
Yeah. It's a paper tiger. It has no actual power. Like when people say like, you know, well, you know, we need laws because laws are what stop people from doing bad things. One, I don't think that's true necessarily. That's true for certain people. But when people say that, what they really mean behind that is that it's like a threat of force that stops people from doing bad things, right? The law is just the word on paper. It's the force that backs up the law. And so like once you kind of have that mindset, you realize that, oh yeah, this is just a paper document. Yeah. The enforcement is all that matters, right? Like that real at the end of the day, the enforcement is all that matters. Without the enforcement itself, it's obviously useless one way or the other, whether you're for the Constitution or against it.
Yeah, it's the way no treason, the Constitution of no authority kind of breaks down the whole constitutional thing is it's like, okay, there is a paper document and then there are individuals who commit violence.
Right.
Like these aren't some chained together like concrete thing that functions smoothly. These are people who have an excuse to be violent.
Right. Yeah. They sometimes conservatives act like the human beings in government are like deterministic robots, where it's like, oh well, they swore an oath to the Constitution, so that means they can only follow through on the programming of the Constitution. You know, it's like, no, they have their own wills, and they're going to do, you know, things outside. They're going to lie, cheat, and steal and murder often. And it's like, no, these people are just, they're not like, what you have to, we always have to frame it in the term of incentives, because conservatives kind of understand that, and that's kind of an inroad into like getting into their mindset, in my opinion. You always have to frame it as like, okay, show me the direct link, the incentive they have to actually follow through on this document. And if you show me that, then I might concede my point.
Yeah, seriously, because I mean, every single one of these so-called public servants, from the president down to every cop on the corner, swears some kind of oath, or there's some flowery, you know, well-dressed language about serving the Constitution, obeying the Constitution, swearing an oath to it, whatever it might be. And then, of course, what does that oath do? Fuck all. They get a little bit teary-eyed, they take some nice pictures, and then they go out and fucking violate people's rights.
Yeah.
So, and you know, where Spooner kind of starts with his argument, because he wasn't just some, you know, pissed off anarchist. He was a legal theorist and he was a practicing lawyer, right?
Yep. Oh yes.
So he wasn't coming at it with like just some kind of rant like, I don't agree with this. He was like, no, the Constitution is a piece of paper with no legal authority, and that stems from the fact because essentially he is tackling not just the U.S. Constitution. He's not some like anti-American anarchist. This is all pieces of paper that, you know, you were never given to sign and be like, I agree to live under these rules. It's just the imaginary social contract of wherever you are.
That's right. Yeah. So Spooner takes it apart. So what Spooner shows, it's not just that the state is immoral in the sense that it like just violates rights, but the Constitution itself is actually not legally sound by the state's own legal jurisprudence.
Yeah.
So like he shows that, okay, if we could replicate this as a contract, because they claim this, because in some sense it claims to be a contract with the people. Well, what is the people? That's just some amorphous aggregate. It's not a specific person. You can't really sit down and have a meeting of the minds with the people, like you normally would have to have with a contract. And he also shows that, okay, if we could just recreate this contract within the bounds of the state's own legal system and try to bind people to it, given the Constitution's justification for binding the people to it, and we took that to court, the courts would throw it out.
Well, yeah.
It would just be like, no, you can't bind people for some, just some, without them signing it, especially just some aggregate of people. No, that they would throw it out immediately. So even the state's courts don't even believe in the Constitution.
Yeah, it really is just a decorative document. I mean, we live in a country, I don't know the exact population, it's like 350 million, right? Somewhere around there?
Somewhere around there. It's not it's not perfect, but it's somewhere around there, yeah.
And you know how many people signed the Constitution?
Oh, like 55, I believe, right?
55 people were in attendance, but 39 people signed it.
Oh, right.
So it's not even like, no, it wasn't even everyone in attendance was like, oh, this is a great idea. 39 people.
Yes.
And at the time of Spooner's writing, which was the 1800s, Civil War period, he wrote No Treason in particular, 1867, for people listening. There was a population, I think, of 40 million, according to his writing at the time. So 40 million at that point in time were being subjected to something signed by 39 people. That's not a contract. That's not even remotely a social contract. Although that's what it's this lofty thing that's the law of the land that no one ever really even reads. I mean, God, you ask half these constitutionalists, they'll know a few lines. Maybe they'll have a pocket constitution, but I bet most of them haven't cracked it.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's like, these 39 people who signed the Constitution have now bind all future generations living on this huge geographic landmass to the same rules. And it's not the same rules, mind you, because the one party, the government, who is supposed to be, in this theory at least, it's supposed to be, one side of the contract, the government and the people. The government has the right to change the rules at whim.
Yeah.
So not only are you bound, you and all your future children and their future children are forever bound within this landmass to obey these people at the threat of violence. You're also, you have no actual say over the rules besides who you will pick to hopefully make the rules in your favor. So it's just like there would never be a contract that would ever be legally allowed like this the quote unquote contract.
Yeah. Yeah, Spooner's whole point about the Constitution is essentially currently used as saying, oh, you are all beholden to the law of the land, the Constitution.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, I'm going to go write on a napkin and bring it into court and be like, no, you're all beholden to my laws. But it has exactly the same amount of worth because guess what? None of you signed that and none of us signed that. So I guess we're all just fucking playing make-believe.
And but the response you'll get to that, right, is that, well, no, you implicitly consent because you stay here. And my response to this is always, well, there's a couple different responses you can take, right? Well, for one, it just implicit consent is only used almost always as a way if like someone is unconscious and they need a medical surgery, then it's like, okay, implicit consent might be justified there, but the whole point of implicit consent in that case is that you can't actually ask the person, they're unconscious. Okay, like that's the whole entire point of that theory. So the fact that the state could ask if you consent, but they don't, should tell you something, right? The state doesn't ask if, hey, do you want to pay taxes? And if you say no, then you don't have to. I wonder if there's a reason they don't ask. There seems, or it'd be like, if I went into your house and I chained a TV to your wall and I turned it on, would you be implicitly consenting or bound to pay me because you looked at the screen? You know what I mean? Like they force all these services on you and they say, well, you're accepting the services, so therefore you're bound to pay. It's
Yeah.
like it always puts the ball in the wrong court, right? It always assumes that you're guilty of something before before they've even asserted that you might be innocent in the first place.
Yeah, and Europe is very good about just piling on that kind of societal guilt. And I think the U.S. government is kind of starting to, or they're definitely starting to get into that habit too. Like things like the TV license in Britain, just everything is somehow like a further government interference in your life. I'm sure you've seen the like the TV license fear mongering campaigns. Like we know what street you're on. Like it'll like literally be a zip code. Like has not paid their TV license in 3 years. We know who you are. It's like, what the fuck? I didn't ask you to take care of my fucking. I got Netflix. Fuck off. Like
exactly. Yeah. No, that's like even as an American looking over the pond, that's always so crazy to me. Like obviously, there's much worse things the government does, but that's just such an absurdity that it's just like what even is this?
What I think is it's cementing that dependency more and more and more, and even it'll be because Europe's perfected it to the point that they can literally do it for something as silly as that. And you're like, well, yeah, the government has to take care of that. And so then you don't even think of questioning way more sinister shit because it's like you're worrying about just trinkets basically.
Yeah,
it's like out of the question at this point.
Yeah, it's like a foot in the door tactic, right? You get them to accept this really small stuff, and then over time you'll get them to accept like these atrocities. Practically,
That's why they look at the U.S. and they're like, God, they're fucking crazy. They're monsters. How can they allow these people to have all of these rights, or whatever?
Yeah. No, it's like everything the state does. They're all like here's one thing I'll say about the Constitution that could be regarded as like a positive, actually, which is that it's a very good, convenient story or narrative, right? It gets people to believe that they're free, specifically conservatives, when quite frankly they're not, right? So it's very important that because conservatives hold on to this ethos, like they always talk about, like, well, this president, he's violating the Constitution, and yet the Constitution was being violated 5 years after it was ratified, and even before then. But that was the 5 years after you had the Alien Sedition Acts, and it's just so. Like conservatives don't have any like type of historical narrative to like piece that together. Oh yeah, this document has been completely ignored since its conception, like in every way possible. Yeah. So having that story that the Constitution is there to protect our freedoms, it does kind of pacify the populace, in my opinion. It pacifies conservatives especially. It's like, oh yeah, actually, we have this things are bad, but at least we have the Constitution. It always keeps them from going to that extra step. Yeah.
And I'm just, every time I gotta respond with Spoonerism. That relates right to what you're talking about. And one of the most famous ones, but whether the Constitution really be one thing or another, this much is certain, that it has either authorized such a government as we have had, or has been powerless to prevent it. In either case, it is unfit to exist.
Man, isn't that a great quote?
Yeah.
That's just I love that one so much.
And the saddest thing is, you'll never hear that in a public school, obviously, because it completely dispels that fairy tale that has pacified, like at least half the country, and even a lot of the so-called modern left will be like, well, constitutionally, and then try and kind of like get people back on their side who are like, oh, freedom, but trying to make them more progressive. It's like, no. This goes back to the Constitution too. And it's just this. It's such a easy and it's a convenient fairy tale, like you said. It's such a good thing to fall back on for them.
It's required for the whole system to work, right? You have to have this fairy tale, because if you didn't, then people might realize that I'm actually being oppressed in some sense here. You know what I mean? It's like if they can just get people to like buy into it, then they've sort of they sort of bought into their own oppression at that point.
Yeah, and they absolutely have. I mean, there is no country where it's easier to get you to send your kid off to war than the United States.
That's right.
You drape some stars and bars, and talk about the Constitution and freedoms, and kids are like, or people are like, "Yep, go on, kid, fight for your country, just like Dad did."
And I mean, you even go into like, if you go to Washington D.C., you'll see the founding fathers of this country like lauded as if they're like like angels or some type of like deity, right? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like that's all over the place. Once they get people to like this happens from a very early age in public schools. You have the presidents there on the wall. You learn about all these things that the country, these great things your country has done. You like, this isn't common anymore in American schools, but it's like you used to put your hand over your heart and pledge allegiance to the country, and you think about that and you think, oh wow, this is really cultish.
Yeah.
This is like Larkin Rose
Yeah.
said, statism is the most dangerous religion, and I think that's true.
Oh,
Mhm.
absolutely. I mean, just the things people will willingly sacrifice, and the harm they'll happily let the state get away with, just because you show them a nice fairy tale, you give them a good narrative. They're like, no, this is the good thing that I've always been taught, and they'll happily just nod their head and go along with every atrocity you put in front of them, including to put it in a contemporary context, is lockdown. I mean, well, the last year of various lockdowns and restrictions that came out of nowhere. I mean, really, the Constitution, freedom? Are you fucking joking?
Right. Yeah. It's like, it's kind of depressing because like I grew up around conservatives, and it's like I'm always waiting for that moment when they'll snap and I'm like, oh, they don't care about the Constitution. And I mean, conservatives understand that they don't care about the Constitution, but their answer for that is, boy, I wish they cared about the Constitution.
Yes.
Right.
It's like, okay, maybe you need to, reframe your thought process here a little bit. It's like, okay, they don't care about the Constitution. We understand that. Now, what are you going to do about it? Right?
Yeah. Their answer is always, we're going to wait for the next guy that supports the Constitution.
That's right. Yeah. It's like this infinite loop that they never get out of, and they and sometimes they're apparently not self-aware enough to actually get out of it. And the ones that do usually do become more radical in some sense, which is good.
Yeah. It takes them getting to like a Bundy Ranch kind of level,
right,
to have any kind of feelings about the matter, where they start to say shit, because the Bundys, they were like starting to say shit about the Constitution having no worth anymore, and you did get the Tea Party sect who were starting to drop the Constitutional and move into more like a conservative libertarian thing.
Yeah. I do think that's good that people like before you can like even approach libertarianism, you kind of, in my opinion, have to cut yourself off from the Constitution.
Yes.
Right. It's like, here's the thing, right? For conservatives, they laud it as this this document that is supposed to limit the government, but the Constitution itself was a coup to get rid of the Declaration or the Articles of Confederation. Right. And the Articles of Confederation were a much more libertarian, much more freedom oriented, structure of rules for the government. There was no federal government. States could not, they could not directly tax. There was no standing army. So the Articles of Confederation, when the Constitution was created, they were like, oh my God, we really need to, amass more power here. We don't have the authority to do almost anything we want to do here. And the people knew that. So it's like, okay, we're going to go in and we're going to amend the Articles of Confederation. But what happened was they closed the doors, and then they threw out the Articles of Confederation even after they said they weren't going to. And then they came out with the Constitution. They're like, all right, well, here it is.
Yeah. Like, what a telling thing about, people always say the winners write history and that stuff.
That's
and
right.
It's absolutely fucking true. I mean,
it is.
like the so-called rebels against modern government in a popular sense, not ourselves, but constitutionalists, people who are like, oh, we need to go back to the way things were. Their framework and their like code for being rebels is already the sanitized version of something that the winners, people who were for bigger government, wrote for them. And it's like, what the fuck are you starting from? You can't dig a little bit more, be a little bit more informed. But that just tells of kind of the state of, I guess, rebelliousness in this country. The safe and allowed version is already sanitized.
Yeah, the
Mhm.
state has, so when the state, like, if you like open up a textbook and you read history, right, what you're really getting is you're getting a commodified version of the state's events. So what's happening is that the state, even things that happened the state didn't like at the time, eventually what they'll do is they'll commodify that into their own narrative and story, so that they can distill like the parts they don't want people to to read, and they can say that, okay, like even if, let's say, the state is like talking about things they did bad in the past, right, what happens is that's okay for them to tell because it's in the past, and therefore it makes it seem like, oh, the state makes mistakes just like we all do, and there's some redemptive quality to it. You know what I mean? Like when you read about slavery, what is the main thing they focus on? Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator, right? So there's always they always have to tag on this like redemptive element, as if what these people did were just like not monstrous crimes.
Yeah.
So they always have to tag on, oh well, look how great it is, had some problem, just a little oopsie, and then we solved it. It's like, but what they don't show you is all the stacks of bodies that these people have caused. That's never in the view of anyone who just opens up a history textbook from their public school.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
what's interesting about Spooner was he was not only like against the Constitution and had major problems with all of that. He was absolutely an abolitionist at the
Yeah.
time.
Oh, yeah. He was a radical abolitionist.
Yeah, and so the guy, he was already he had written about slavery prior to the Civil War. I guess that kind of saw what was coming, and knew that had to be could see the inconsistency in a country that was supposedly land of the free and all that, and then still
Right.
had enslaved men, which is a big part of why he was an anarchist,
Yeah.
and then he saw just this disgusting bloody war, right? In unavoidable. Back then it was everywhere, and he's like, wow, I yeah, he had what we all have, and I told you so moment. Was
Right.
like
Mhm.
we could have spared so much bloodshed, and I actually got a good quote, as I've got so many of these tucked away. Why did these men abolish slavery? Not from any love of liberty in general, not as an act of justice to the black man himself, but only, quote, as a war measure, and because they wanted his assistance, and that of his friends in carrying on the war, they had undertaken for maintaining and intensifying that political, commercial, and industrial slavery to which they had subjected the great body of the people, both black and white.
Yeah,
So
that's a great quote.
he's like, oh yeah, so they exhausted like so much life. They killed so many people over an issue to have dominance over the entire country, to make sure that no one seceded.
Right. Yeah.
So they
And
oh, sorry.
sorry, I was just going to say, and the northern states, the border states in the north, were still allowed to have slaves throughout the war in the north. So this whole idea that, oh well, the north, they were just trying to fight to end slavery, it's like, no, they did not enter the war to fight slavery. That's like, there were some northern abolitionists, don't get me wrong, obviously, who were supportive of the war to end, in the hopes that it would end slavery. But the people who actually, many of them, Lincoln himself, did not enter the war specifically to free the slaves. That's like an after the fact, justification. That was just a lie, essentially.
Yeah, it's some nice whitewashing that makes him look like a real hero.
That's right.
Yeah, but in reality, it was just like it wasn't even really part of it. It was making sure he didn't lose out on 50% of his tax cattle.
Right, right. And another thing that I like to point out about this is that, if they really cared about the slaves, and they really wanted to make the slaves free men, why did they burn down the fruits of their labor? Sherman's March destroyed all of these almost all of like these plantations and all of the slave property that the slaves had built.
Mhm.
By doing that, they robbed them of future restitution that they could have given the slaves. You know what I mean? Like from a libertarian theory, the slaves were the actual owners of the fruits of their labor that they produced while they were enslaved. And when the North came in and they burned everything down, they robbed them. They did a double injustice to them, where they a lot of them were killed, mind you, and they also robbed them of future restitution. So then when the Reconstruction happened, they were impoverished, completely impoverished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what this country would look like if those people have actually had some kind of start, like
Oh God, yeah.
property to build on, grow on, to make
Right.
communities on,
And you know,
to,
they actually did, you know, they did really well considering that they had nothing
yeah.
afterwards. And just imagine how much better it could have been if they actually had a start, you know, like you said.
Yeah, but that goes to show how sterilized our history is. You know, it's always like how well we did in like in freeing them. It's like you freed them and then you fucked them, which
Yeah.
is what kind of a liberty is that?
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's kind of like this, you know, sometimes it gets thrown around like anarcho-tyranny, where it's like, hey, you're free now, but you're free in only a very limited way. And
Yeah.
we're just going to like, we're going to impoverish you in other ways and screw you, but we're still going to laud you for your freedom. You know, it's like, oh, wonderful, fantastic. Like they were, you know, they weren't allowed to own weapons, you know, afterwards. That was the Reconstruction. Gun control in America comes from Reconstruction, or actually it comes from even earlier in like the Native American period. But you know, that was the big push for modern gun control comes directly from Reconstruction, because they did not want blacks to own any weapons.
Yeah, they're like, oh my god, they might want revenge. It's like, yeah,
That's
they fucking might.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, this country would have been so different if people had been allowed to be individuals instead of there's always been this savior mentality.
Yeah.
But that's how these governments have to exist, and that's something that all of No Treason touches upon that.
No Treason is one of the most important book, it's not even a book, but it's like more like an essay. It's one of the most important essays you can ever read. Like, if you're listening, you need to read No Treason. It's unbelievable.
Absolutely. It's like, my copy is 72 pages. I assume it's always around that.
Yeah.
And it's perfect. It's like, it's bite-sized, but it's all you need. Like, if you just slip that as a stocking stuffer into your... If you have any conservatives who are like on the cusp, they're a little bit butthurt about MAGA, they're kind of overcounting the vote at this point. They're just wondering who they're going to vote for next time. Slip them No Treason. Maybe you'll save them some heartache.
I do want to plug another essay that I do think is really well, and it complements No Treason a lot, but it's kind of different, which is The Myth of the Rule of Law by John Hasness. It is an essay where he goes through and he just shows that this idea of like that there is a rule of law, or that there could even be a rule of law, is insane. And he shows that, you know, that any proceeding, any legal proceeding where they're trying to discuss, okay, given the past events of the law, and we're going to make a future law based on the past events, he shows that actually there's good reasons for two contradictory laws to be made given past events, because there is no single monolithic set of laws that emerges even in a state. Like, even if you have a monopolistic state, different people within that state are going to make laws that are completely contradictory based on the same issues, and they have good reasons to make those laws within their own framework. So it completely just destroys this idea that, oh yeah, if we have a state, then we have a single rule of law that we can all get behind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can see that with self-defense laws in this country. I mean,
yes.
There's so many states where, you know, there's so many restrictions on how you might defend yourself, especially back east. And then at the same time, police, you know, in multiple court hearings and challenges and stuff, you know, they don't have any obligation to protect you. I mean, we all know this in our circle, but I mean, it just stacks on to that point that there's so much contradiction. It's like, okay, well, police don't have to defend you, but you do have Second Amendment rights, but not in this state, but sometimes in other places. Like, okay, what the fuck are we doing?
And you're allowed to shoot a home intruder in the middle of the night unless they're wearing a badge, of course.
yeah. Like, I'm subject to any kind of random search and seizure with guns. Maybe they'll kill my pets. Maybe they'll kill my loved ones. Because they have a badge. They're very different to the other home intruders.
That's right. Yeah. And of course, you know, from the state's perspective, you know, they'll say that people or conservatives will say, we have all these rights. The Constitution gives us all these rights. Well, the Constitution, for one, the Constitution does not even say that the Constitution grants you your rights, right? So when I see conservatives say that the Constitution grants your rights, it really just like makes my head want to explode. But besides that, it's like you have the rights that the state lets you have, and that's one of my main arguments against the Constitution. It's like, look, you're putting the ball in the state's court when you should be reserving your rights for yourself. You should not be letting them determine your rights. That's just like if you let the government determine your rights, you've already lost. Like the game's over at that point, right? You know what I mean? If you're going to let them just unilaterally dictate, say, oh yeah, we're going to determine through the Constitution that you no longer have gun rights because it's constitutional to change the Constitution. You know what I mean? So if they do that, conservatives will have to make a choice. They're like, oh, well, I mean, it was constitutional. I guess we got to do it. Or they can say, okay, well, no, I don't care about the Constitution now. I'm just going to stick with my gun rights. And those are the people who become anarchists, and the other ones are the conservatives who will just like get on the train car.
Seriously, it's like, hey, let's just fight it in court, man. Like,
that's right.
There's the Constitution. It's a little bit too early to be wearing gear and carrying rifles in the Capitol. That's a little bit extreme. The Constitution's still a thing. We're not in the USSR yet. Just fight it in court, man. Right. I believe in the system. Like, dude,
and
God help you.
I have to preface this by saying I'm not advocating anything, but I do want to say that the founding fathers were cop-killing drunks.
Yes. And
you know what I mean?
And that was one of the only good things about them.
Yes. It's like they shot British soldiers in the street. Like, just like jumped them completely.
They'd given up, and they were like, well, you guys aren't fucking listening to us, and I'm kind of sick of the wanton violence with a uniform, so I guess this is what I have to do now, man.
Right, yeah, exactly. So it's like, if you accept the story of the Constitution, if you're like a liberty-minded, like conservative, let's say, or you revere the Constitution in some sense, even the Constitution itself it is kind of tyrannical. Like it's not a, there's this belief that I think gets overlooked a lot. That, well, if only the Constitution worked, then it'd be great. Well, no, it's actually not a great document, as we were talking about before, like with the Articles of Confederation. It's like, no, this document was created to increase state power. It created the federal government. Like, that was the purpose of the Constitution. The Bill of Rights were an after side effect from because there was like debate when the convention was going on that, well, we still want people to have some amount of rights. So, the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists debated on this for a very long time before they said, okay, fine, we'll add in a Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights.
The Federalists were like, rights? Really?
Well... well, it's funny because the Anti-Federalists did not want a list of rights because they felt like they felt like what happened was going to happen. They felt like, okay, if we just write down a list of rights, people are going to think these are their only rights, and then they're going to be subject to the state's interpretation. And that is actually what happened. The Anti-Federalists did get a win in the Constitution, or in the Bill of Rights, with the 9th Amendment, which basically says that all rights not listed here are reserved for the people in the state. It's probably the most ignored amendment. Like, I've never heard a single person ever seriously bring up the 9th Amendment, even though it should, even though it says, oh yeah, by the way, you have rights that are not listed here. But because legal scholars can't use that to choke your rights out, that just never gets brought up. It just gets completely ignored. But I got sidetracked. I apologize.
That's what we do, man. No, it brings up a very good point. I mean, it's just like the whole thing where it's like no one has actually signed this legal document that's meant to protect them,
right?
And so even the way it's written is kind of fucked. It's just a little bit ill-considered.
That's right.
And we do have to keep in mind, this thing was written, like, we look at the pictures or portraits of the founding fathers, and they're all, white-haired and very, very grand and stuff. They were a bunch of 20-year-olds, like 20, 30-year-olds for the most part.
Right.
They were very fucking young, and they were well-educated.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they didn't have, like, a lifetime of legal writing, and they were rebels, and they were, like, kind of figuring out as they went. It was an experiment. And so the Constitution, as many people like to think in fucking the year of our Lord 2021, that's still the best solution to society.
Right. They'll say like, well, yeah, it has problems, but it's the best we got.
It's like,
well.
all right, well, maybe we should keep on fucking thinking then, dude.
Right. Yeah, maybe we haven't found the answer just yet, if that's your best solution here.
Like,
look around. You think this is the best solution we got?
It's like, well, if we just listen to it, Ace, like, seriously, we just need to go back to it. I just wish you'd listen to me.
Man, if only the mass shooter would stop shooting up this school right now, everything would be really keen. Everything would be really groovy.
Like the sign was on the door.
Yeah, that's right. Didn't he see the sign? What's going on here?
This is California. Come on.
Yeah, that's right. You're not supposed to have guns. The sign says you can't.
It's because they've allowed AR-15s again. That's
right.
That's why it's dangerous now.
That's right. Yeah. Jeez.
Oh, it's
Do you guys remember when we were like 9 months into a lockdown and Justin Amash, like a serious candidate for the Libertarian Party, was like, we just need to follow the Constitution.
Oh my, I remember that. Yeah.
Is this really what you're tweeting right now?
It's like, oh, thanks, Amash. I forgot to drink today.
It's like, oh, you're being loaded on a train car. Man, I wish they would just follow the Constitution.
You're complaining to the guards, shoving you on, like, dude, the Constitution. You swore an oath to it.
That's right.
As he fucking rifle butts you in the face.
Right. Oh god.
Or they're just like screaming it's unconstitutional.
Yeah, you can't imagine if the roles were reversed. Oh man. Yeah. God. Yeah, it makes me like, I have more of a deeper connection to it, I think, because I grew up around conservatives, but it's really sickening to me because they like deify the founders and they deify the Constitution. Like, I'm not even like, this is my own personal experience. It's anecdotal. I can't say it's true for all conservatives, but certainly conservatives I've been around do truly view the Constitution as a divinely inspired document. And this allows them to, throw away, a lot of their reason and just say, oh, well, look, like, this is obviously correct, and I don't need to, critically examine it anymore because I know it's obviously correct, right? So you kind of have this like circular reasoning they introduce to like justify it. It's like, this would be my thing for conservatives. It's like, okay, like, you understand that people who don't have incentives to do things are less likely to do those things, and you also think that the market is generally the most efficient way to organize, just society in general. But somehow, when it's the state, you then take in, you're like, okay, let's have the most important social functions monopolized by the people you don't think are competent enough to make your shoes, right? Because that's what that's ultimately, whether they understand, whether they're thinking in those terms or not, I don't think they are. That's what they're implying. They're like, let's say, okay, I would not trust this group of people called the government to make my car or make my shoes, but I want them to make law and security, and I want them to be the only ones who make law and security.
Yeah, it's such a weird balance of trust where they'll be so skeptical, so openly, and that's why so many people get trapped in the conservative circle for like so long, because they're like, we're good on these things, right? and it takes like a few election cycles to be like, oh no, we suck balls at this stuff. We haven't got a fucking clue what we're doing actually. Right. If you don't end up buying into it and just punch the red button until you're 60.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. It's just so, it's kind of depressing, but I am hopeful because I have seen conservatives like start to turn on cops more, and that's been something that's amazing to see. Like, that's probably been like the one big like red like white pill for me in the past couple months, has been like, oh, okay, there are some conservatives who are not defending cops, and no matter who they murder, and that's really, really exciting to see.
Yeah, it's been a long fucking push. I'm sure Mel has pulled out more hair than all of us.
Right.
seeing the propaganda and all that.
Yeah.
And the constant forgiveness for the most outrageous shit. Even applying to, I mean, there's been so many times where, especially doing gun rights stuff, like protests, and we think we're making some headway, and usually we are. Like the Richmond rally with Trudy Confucius and all that in 2020 was very anti-cop. There was so much like, you know, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me kind of attitude out there, which hadn't been seen from that, well, from the gun rights crowd really ever, you know, apart from Bundy Ranch. And that, to me, that feels like a big turning point. The fact that publicly so many conventionally right-wing people were willing to protest cops and to, you know, kind of thumb their nose at and do it was, what do you call it? Damn it. Peaceful protest, I guess. It was or civil disobedience rather. It was right. And right-wingers never do civil disobedience.
No, never.
They want law and order, and they'll fight it in court. So seeing right-wingers spring to civil disobedience was a massive fucking shift, because the left has been doing it very well since, you know, like the 60s. They got decades and decades, and rightfully so. It's been used very effectively.
Yeah, the left has been way more effective at just organizing in general than the right. Like the right, if you look at the right, it's like, you know, Michael Mouse has that quote, the conservatives are just progressives driving the speed limit. It's really true. But in another sense, it's like the conservatives have all, politically speaking, have almost always been subservient to like people in power, whether that be other like Republican right-wing types or other leftists. It's like, they've always been subservient. They've always thought, oh, well, you know, these are the people in power. We might not like them. They might be doing horrible, horrible things, but, you know, it's the law's the law, and we have to follow the law, because that's what being a good person is. Being a good person means following the law, and that's the conservative doctrine, right?
Yep. Respect the office. Always.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And respect the badge, even if they're, you know, murdering your family in the process.
Yeah. And like you said, I think we are just on the cusp of it. Now that gun laws, I think the lockdown made it all a bit more real, because before this, people were willing to stick their fingers in their ears and like, nah, they're not going to enforce gun control. That every cop I know is a gun guy. And then they see them, you know, knocking on church doors and dragging people out and all sorts of crazy shit against, you know, like peaceful people in their mind. Because, you know, from our perspective, we see peaceful people all over the place, all sorts of different persuasions, you know, arguing for different things. But to them, whenever you see someone protesting police, that's a violent person, you know? So that they don't give them the benefit of the doubt. Whatever happens to police protesters, fair enough.
That's right. If you saw someone on the side of the street just getting beat up and just like clubbed by like 3 people standing over them, you would all think, oh my God, this is horrible. This is an assault. But if you magically just turned around and you saw a badge on, you're like, oh, well, you know.
I need some context.
Yeah,
I need some context.
Right. Yeah. It's really just, it's incredible. It's terrible. But as we were saying, I do think there's some sort of hope there. You know, the proliferation of 3D printed guns is also something great. You know, the idea that, you know, we don't care what the Constitution says, you're not getting our guns. That's the type of mentality that's, you know, actually going to do something. You know, just going back, I'm repeating myself kind of now, but going back to what I said, it's like, you know, if you let the state determine your rights, you've already lost. Just turn in your guns now. Just do it. Just do it. It's just,
If you're waiting to see if your particular, I don't know, gun activist lobby of choice or whatever it might be is gonna, you know, win in court, and then whatever that outcome is, you're gonna live that way, whether it's a win or a loss, you've already lost. If you're waiting on oh, here might be Resi joining it, like,
hey,
there we go. But yeah, if you're waiting on courts to determine your rights, then you don't really believe in rights. You believe in law, and that's right. That's a very different thing. And, you know, again, the Constitution, it's never going to fall down to the Constitution being like that shield in front of your rights. That, oh, well, the court said this about, I don't know, 30-round magazines. Bing! Oh, it bounced off the bulletproof Constitution. Nah, that's not gonna fucking happen. You're gonna sit there waiting for it, and then when you're, you know, thumb up your ass and you've got no 3D printer, you've got absolutely no idea about civil disobedience, you're just, you know, waiting to panic by in the last 30 days that it's allowed, and then you'll be like, yeah, feeling like a criminal until the day you die.
I would also feel bad if I didn't mention that, you know, conservatives are also terrible on gun rights, even though it's like their main thing. You know, it's like if we go back to like Reagan, you know, Reagan passed a bunch of like gun gun restrictions, because this was in like the 60s and 70s and even 80s. The conservatives got really scared because Black Panthers were openly carrying guns, and this really, really terrified conservatives. And then this is one of the reasons why they decided, well, we need to start regulating these guns a little, because people we don't like are now having them. So it's always just what's good for us is good for us, but what's good for you is not good for you, or not good for me. Yeah, so that's kind of always been their mentality.
Yeah, like they always pretend that they've been the proprietors of black gun rights since since time began, since it was Lincoln's party. It's like, hey guys, 1967 California, who was stopping people from auditing police stops with a rifle and a pistol on their side?
That's right.
Guess what? It was Reagan and the NRA, and I make sure every time the NRA posts anything that's like, oh yeah, this like black guy saying something about gun rights, I'm like, oh yeah, but you kind of kneecap the Black Panthers in '67, guys. Like, what are you on
Communists are much more pro-gun than conservatives are in general.
Seriously, I have had such better conversations with outright, and it's gonna piss off some of you, with outright communists. I don't fucking care anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Mark says that, quote, under no pretext should arms and ammunition ever be surrendered.
Yeah, and he wasn't even like the coolest communist. I mean,
no, he wasn't.
I was talking to Childeberg because she was like, oh well, I'm not sure about Kropotkin and Marx button heads, and communists aren't just this united front of statist authoritarians. There was, just like libertarians, I guess communists like to argue with other communists as well.
Yeah, the communists hate other communists just like libertarians hate other libertarians. We do share that in common.
It's a beautiful autistic fucking.
That's right.
But yeah, like there's some pinkos that you can talk to, and you're like, holy shit. Yeah, man. Yeah. keep that thing on your side. And then some conservatives are like, well, we can't let it be the Wild West. The Wild West is a Hollywood imagination.
Thank you. Yeah, I talked about this the other day, but like whenever I see people in like criticizing anarchy by, well, it would be the Wild Wild West. It's like, you understand, this was made up. Like it's just it's a fabrication. The Wild West was one of the more peaceful times in American history. Like we talk about like these bank robberies like when in history because they were rare. Yeah. You know what I mean?
They were interesting. Not commonplace.
I would love to be back to the Wild Wild West.
Yes, me too.
That'd be amazing.
Oh, dude, that's why I moved to Arizona. I was hoping there was some of that still around here.
There's this great piece called I think it's called the Not So Wild Wild West, and it's I hate myself because I forget the person who wrote it, but it's on the Mises Institute or the Mises website.
I think I read that.
Yeah, it talks about like how actually this was a place where there was practically no government. There was maybe a sheriff, and people like autonomously developed property rights and all these different like townships. They developed this form of like common law, which is like this polycentric form of law where it's like it's not monopolistic, it's just there to like help resolve disputes. So you have all these places like out in the the frontiers and that the state can't reach, and you had this comparatively you had this comparatively peaceful existence. And the fact that people like say, oh well, you could walk out your door and just get shot. It's like, no, that did not happen.
Well, I mean, that could always happen. That could happen to me checking the mail right now, which is why
that could happen now. Yes, that's true. In fact, I'm more likely to get shot by a cop today than I am some random person in the Wild West 100 years ago.
Yeah, seriously. If I walk to my mailbox, I'm smoking a joint, and some nasty Karen watches me do that and has a problem with it, I might die.
Yeah, absolutely. That's that's a real and present threat.
Yeah, and something a lot of people don't consider is the Wild West was mostly. Well, I don't want to go too hardcore on the mostly. All right, the Wild West was largely settled by women opening, brothels and becoming successful businesswomen.
That's right. That is Russell's book, Dangerous History, I believe. Or no, wait. God, why am I blanking on the name?
History.
Renegade History. Thank you. Renegade History talks just about that. It's like, and they developed these institutions, these businesses, and they also like resolve disputes without the state, something that we're told is not possible.
Well, they probably did it wrong. All of it was probably
Right.
mismanaged and really dangerous and a little bit,
Right.
savage. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, what you really start to see with Western history is when the state started to move out there is when it got bloodier. Like the Pinkerton agency moving out there and getting involved and kind of starting to take over large swaths of land and coming into just combatants with everyone out there who are already civilizing it in a very human way, where civilization was needed, or where where it was going to happen, not where government was forcing itself.
Most people know how the Native Americans were kicked off the land, but what people might not know as much is that even people who were on that land who later homesteaded it were then later also kicked off the land by the state when they came in. Like the state would like have these railroad companies come in and they would kick these people off the land through like an eminent domain type of situation. And it's like after this frontier was quote unquote resettled by just homesteaders, the state came in and wiped them off the land too.
It's like, oh shit, is that potential tax capital on the horizon?
Right.
Westward we must go.
That's right.
And what the state didn't do themselves, they allowed private corporations to do for them.
Oh yeah, they specifically used them to like help administer this. Like the railroads in America and the state were completely almost intertwined with each other. It was
just like today in the pharmaceutical companies.
That's right.
Like with the lobbyists and everything like that.
Oh yeah.
The railroad industry owned the government.
And as Biard said, like the Pinkertons, they were very much entangled.
It's a private corporation, man.
That's right. Yeah.
What people fail to realize with a lot of that stuff is, and this is a completely different thing to the Constitution, but whatever, I think we've put that to rest, is like all of that, if a company, actually no, this does tie back into Spooner, and I'll get to it, but so many corporations, they set themselves up as satellites of the state.
Yes.
And that's something Spooner does go into kind of in the last few pages. He talks about how the most profitable thing a bank can do is just loan and loan and loan to the state to subjugate its people and keep them scared and keep ensure that it has more and more tax capital in the future. And so it'll be able to pay a much bigger amount of interest on that subjugation. It's investing in the subjugation of the people, and being a loyal lapdog of the state and being able to provide those resources and being in bed with the state, a satellite of it. Guess what? They're going to profit way more than any honest enterprise because there's a monopoly on force. Not that that's what Spooner would have called it, but that's what it was.
No, exactly. And it's like when you look at the incentives of corporations in America, do you think that they want some like anarchist libertarian society? No, they don't. They want to get corporate welfare, right? Like the reason, like you just have to think about this for a second in the context of like when Ron Paul ran for president. Everyone likes to make libertarianism out to be this like this corporatist ideology. You just want corporations running everything. It's like, okay, who did the corporations donate to the most? It was Mitt Romney and Barack Obama. Ron Paul had Peter Thiel, one billionaire in America, donated to his campaign. Right,
that guy must be interesting as fuck.
Yeah, he's pretty out there. I don't know how I feel about him, but I'm sure he'd be interesting to talk to.
Yeah, I've never heard of him before, so I don't know.
Yeah,
for all I know, he eats babies or something.
Yeah, he hangs out with the Bilderberg crowd, and yeah. But anyway, the corporations just want corporate welfare. They don't want a free market. The last thing some corporation wants is a free market. You know what I mean? A corporation wants to monopolize the market so that they can get the most profit margins. So therefore, that that's always the thing. It's like, no, corporations do not want a free market. They want a state to regulate and capture the market. That's what they want.
There's nothing quite like a guaranteed government paycheck that can be so disgustingly inflated and not accounted for that, and all you have to do is like kick a little bit of capital to poor mayors running for senator, congressional seats, presidential seats, and next thing you know, you scratch their back, they scratch yours.
No, exactly.
It's a good fucking relationship. You don't have to work for it, really.
That's right. No, that's completely correct. Yeah, and it's just like. At a certain point, oh, go ahead.
I was like,
yeah, suckling off the government is always easier than putting out a good product or a good service.
yeah.
It's like, a lot of these corporations are actually just like held together with the state, right? People always talk about, oh, they have these huge profit margins, worth billions and billions of dollars. But a lot of that is either reinvested or it is like a loan from some that they're just holding on to. And it's like, actually, they're barely holding on with state subsidies right now. Like if you took the subsidies away, they would have to either downsize rapidly or they would just like collapse.
There's multiple examples of that. I mean, for one, the popular one at the minute would be Tesla, because Elon is apparently now the richest man on earth, which is crazy. I thought that would have been Bezos, considering like Tesla's income is
divorce.
Oh, divorce. Yeah, no, you're right. Fucking hell, I forgot about that. Poor Bezos.
Well, I think a lot of that is just propaganda to make him seem like some kind of fucking hero, because these richest men in the world reports never actually report the richest men in the world. They report the ones they want you to think about. Like they don't.
Okay,
talk about,
no, you're right there. I'd agree with that.
So they're just pushing Elon as some great fucking capitalist, and he's not. He's just another fucking part of the government system.
Well, yeah, that's
exactly what they want, and you know what? And he's profiting himself. Not in the ways they're quite saying he is, but like that whole thing with the fucking Bitcoin and Dogecoin. He bought a bunch of Bitcoin, got the market to raise up, sold it, and then talked shit about it.
Well, he made more money than he's ever made selling cars, selling on his Bitcoin.
Oh, 100%.
And the whole thing about all of his income is it's mostly government subsidies. Like, it's really not from selling cars or from any of his like SpaceX shit. That's all just burning money. And so he's got so much income from government subsidies, and yet he's meant to be this like powerful, like capitalist.
Well, he's controlled opposition. They put him in there as that little thing in the Matrix. Like they can't make it too perfect. Like Alex Jones, like they allow him to be around because he's controlled opposition. He always sandwiches a truth between two lies.
Did you just put down Alex Jones on our show?
I'm not putting him down.
He's our only source. He's our only source, man.
Alex Jones and Ace's tweets.
Yeah, no, that is all we use. Go ahead. No. I've been rambling for a minute. What were you gonna say?
Oh, I was just saying I actually can tie this right back into the Constitution too, like with the corporation talk. The concept, like if you talk about corporations, one of their biggest moneymakers, which is completely artificial, is intellectual property. Right. And this was something in the Constitution, and like the idea of, property, the intellectual property is that this comes directly all the way back from old states, which is like it's a mercantilist invention. Right. It's like, OK, we want to crowd out the market and we want to monopolize ideas and say, OK, this other person can't even, copy our idea. And this is one of the biggest reasons why these corporations can grow so large is because they threaten state violence against other competitors who can not, legally speaking, compete against their own work, against their own idea, even not just, So it really all, like, corporations as a whole do come from this American legal system of mercantilism, right? That's where they arise from. They're not necessarily, naturally arising, free market institutions.
I didn't know where to continue from that. I was
sorry.
No. I was like, yeah, man. Yeah. I just had hits joint. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Okay. Well, I came in a little late. If we're categorizing,
yes.
if we're categorizing corporation as a process of the state, what would we just call a large company in the absence of the state?
A firm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
There we go. That's a nice word.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to make sure we're using the same terminology.
Yeah.
Well, it's always funny. I got in an argument infamously with Heckler and Koch. Like the this, for those that don't know, this big weapons manufacturing company from Germany, and they've been around for a minute. They were producing like MP40s and shit, right?
I believe so.
Like, Rezi, you know anything about that?
About what Heckler and Koch produced? Were
they producing weapons for like 1940s Germany?
Oh, I don't know the exact history.
Ah,
if they were around, they were producing weapons for someone.
Well,
it's possible they could have been created with a state government at that time to produce weapons.
That's true. But my point being, I got in an argument with them on Instagram. Like, they have like 1 million followers, which is ridiculous, and which is ludicrous. And I posted this picture of an ATF agent in a balaclava, looking pretty goonish, and he was carrying an MP5, which is one of their weapon systems. And it was like definitely one of theirs, because it's the US, so it's not gonna be some like cheap ripoff. And so I just posted something saying like, they're in bed with the state and blah blah blah, and they can't back gun rights because they're equipping the ATF. And their pissy little social media guy responded to me, and essentially his point was that we wouldn't be enjoying their guns, which civilian versions of their guns are so limited because they cuck to restrictions and shit. They bow their head to everything and really don't focus on the civilian market because they make so much money from government contracts. Everything from, in the States, they equip all sorts of federal and police agencies, the military, and then allegedly they've also provided Hong Kong police during the riots with grenade launchers.
And this is pretty standard in most of the major gun manufacturers.
I know, but my point being is that they were like, oh no, we are great supporters of the Second Amendment, blah 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 blah. It's like, motherfucker, if you didn't have government contracts, you would be like a niche kind of hipster little gun store in Germany that a handful of people knew of, But because of government contracts, it's so inflated.
All the gun manufacturers and all the bootlicking statists that love them will tell you, well, if we weren't selling them to the government, we wouldn't even be in business.
Yeah,
well,
like Colt
I think it's pretty much proven that American citizens buy more guns than every government agency in the world combined per year. Per year. So don't tell me that maybe you wouldn't be in business because of all the kickbacks you get. It kind of ties it back into like, if they're telling you that, how much money are they getting? Because in a free market, they wouldn't want to even sell to the government. The government's a horrible customer. They're fucking late on their fucking payments. They're really not ordering that much shit.
Okay, so I have some Constitution-related stuff to talk about. I asked my followers if they had any questions for you. We kind of already touched on it, but maybe you could just refresh, and it's a little bit to read. So stick with me.
All right.
He said, I have a question, but it's long in written form, and I honestly take no offense if you'd rather not read through it, but I'm going to. It says...
This is a first.
It's actually really good too. 10 years after the Constitution was written, the federal government passed laws that forbid criticizing the government, and the Supreme Court justices rejected the efforts of defendants and their lawyers to challenge the law's constitutionality. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison stated that the Bill of Rights couldn't prevent abuses of power by federal government. Some of the largest newspapers across the states suspended operations because their editors ended up in prison. Whoa. Throughout the entire time this occurred, nowhere was there an effort by the armed citizens or militias to stop the federal government's disregard of the Constitution. So my question would be, in regard to why contemporary opinion is that the spirit of the country after the Revolution was one of commitment to liberty, as expressed in the Bill of Rights. It was immediately recognized from the beginning that the Constitution was absent of any repercussions if lawmakers were to violate it. I'm bringing this up because most polemic against the Constitution coming from anarchists begins at an imagined view that the founders were in good effort actually attempting to limit the government. The criticism against the Constitution seems on better footing if it points out immediately how the Constitution never offered any attempt to prevent a centralized authority all over the country.
Who wrote that? Did they want to be named?
He didn't say he didn't want to be named. It's Ziploc M88.
Okay, well, shout out to you. Yeah, I think like the question of like why, why isn't this, more known? It's kind of like a cynical answer, but I think it's the correct one. It's sort of like, well, they don't want you to, it's like they need you to believe have a certain, like, the narrative of the Constitution has to be constructed by them, or else you're going to see the fault lines. You know what I mean? So you have to. They have to get you to buy into this myth, this like creation myth of the country, or of the Constitution at the very least, and they need it to be constructed in such a way where you feel safe. You feel like, okay, as bad as things might be, we have a Constitution, and that protects us. And then they can go pick your pocket and go like murder your family while they do it, and you can feel safe because oh well, we have a Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier, the whole fairy tale thing. I mean, they do so much due diligence to mislead and to kind of misinform about what the Constitution is. We just...
Right. I would also go a little further, even saying that like all societies, like even like any you can name, right, even throughout history, they're all constructed through like narratives and like myths and stuff to a certain extent. They all have to have this certain narrative that kind of binds people together in some sense to get people on board. And the Constitution is this country's like the creation myth. It's their narrative. So they have to be able to monopolize it and construct it in a certain way to where that's how they kind of keep, quote unquote, order.
I mean, that's very similar to, monarchies and things like that in other countries.
Oh, yeah.
Going all the way back to ancient Egypt, where, every pharaoh was a god, and same thing with kings and stuff. They were, like, appointed by God. It was all... And then our rights in this country, it's like, oh, liberty, and it comes from God. It's always this, like, divine... This is... creation story is definitely the right word for it. I've never applied that to to founding documents or anything, but yeah, 100%. Do you have any other questions, Bill?
Okay. While I'm looking for a question, I have something that's sort of like been an intrusive thought ever since you guys talked about how the founders were like boozy rebels or whatever.
Yeah.
If Jacob Lindsay was born in 1776, like late 20s to early 30s, rebellious and drunk, that's Childerberg. Like, you guys would have been the Constitutional Convention.
That's right.
Instead of in a pub somewhere out east, we'd be sitting in Texas around the fire, discussing how we're gonna kick this thing off. I mean, so that's something SOR was talking about a lot, like how so many of these like boogaloo boys, they want to jump, grab your plates, grab your rifle, and fix the country. It's like, you guys are missing 1771 through 1775, where people were meeting and discussing, and not saying, we're looking at some kind of revolution in the revolutionary war sense, but this is the time when people are meeting and gathering and building these networks and communities. That's 100% what we just did at Childerberg, biggest one yet. And so many, we were mixing with so many people, like we've all been talking about gun rights people, mixing with crypto people, mixing with Anthony Samaroff talking about UBI and stuff. That's someone I would have never come across. Like,
right.
We wouldn't have rubbed shoulders, even though he's a Scotsman and we come from a tiny island. But so 100%, Jacob Lindsay would have been a very interesting revolutionary.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I could see it. Tricorner hat, he could rock it.
Okay, so I just looked through some of the questions, and in typical my follower fashion, Malice said on a podcast that one of the bigger problems with anarchy is children. What is Ace's solution?
Oh, okay. Well, this is actually a really serious and good question.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, I, mean, I don't
100%.
Listen to Malice.
It needs to be addressed.
Yeah, it does need to be addressed. Okay, so my view on this. Okay, so I should.
Okay, I get it now.
I should acknowledge like the elephant in the room here, because I feel like everyone's question on children kind of like stems from this. Is that Rothbardian Ethics of Liberty has this one passage that I vehemently disagree with, where he talks about how it's not a rights violation to starve your child. Okay, that out of the way. I disagree, and so children are difficult in the sense of rights because they can't consent obviously to certain things, being children, but I also believe they are rights bearing creatures. You know what I mean? They do have rights. They just don't necessarily have access to all of them, if that makes sense. I know that's kind of like, stretching it a little bit, but so yeah, my belief is that children are not property of their parents. They are their own rights bearing people, and they just don't have the capacity to consent in all situations. In the same way that a person who is incredibly drunk can't sign a contract, we would not say they would be able to sign a contract to like buy a house or something. You know what I mean? So they still have the right. That drunk person still has rights, but they just can't access them given their current like mental cognitive state. So that's what I would say children are analogous to, is like, a drunk person at a bar. So, I think that, so the reason a parent has an obligation to a child is this is also something, it's like, well, why do they have an obligation? Well, so in libertarianism, you can acquire an obligation for another person by your action. So if I put if I push you in a lake, I have an obligation to I have a legal and moral obligation to get you out of that position I put you in. Right. Okay. Right. So when when parents create a child, that child is in a position due to the parents' actions. They are in a weak, vulnerable position, and to abandon the child without care, in my view, would be an aggression. You're fleeing the obligation you endowed upon yourself by your actions. So that's how I would kind of view that. It would be sort of similar. It would be an analogy I use. It would be analogous to like if someone's on a plane, you have a pilot and you have passengers, right? Abandoning your child and just letting them starve would be analogous to an airline pilot just jumping out of the plane, parachuting down, and letting the plane crash. So I do think that is aggression. Yeah. I do think that is wrong. So I would, on the child question, I am very much pro children have rights and the parents have a right to feed them.
I would think the two biggest age questions would be, or maybe three, as far as sex, age of consent, age at what they can go to work, and age at what they can sign a contract.
Sure.
And my personal belief, I have children, it's kind of, you have to take every kid as they are. Like there can't be a hard number. Like my kids aren't prepared for the same things other kids are. They might be better prepared than those other kids, but like as far as like getting off to work and like age of consent with sex, they're like way behind a lot of other kids in today's day and age.
So I think there are like different I think there are like there can be some ambiguity, but it's within a set, within a reasonable set, right? So it's like, is the age of consent like 18 or 17? You know what I mean? They're like, between 16 or 18, things like that. I do think there is some ambiguity there, but I certainly think the wrong answer would be like, 12 or something, absurd like that. You know what I mean? So there can be, ambiguity within a certain set of like age ranges, but at a certain point you're like, okay, this is just obviously wrong. You know what I mean?
I agree with that.
Yeah, there's certain like biological realities and shit like that. That also like there's sense you can put into kind of the loose ambiguity, like you said, there's a set range where it's like, okay, it's somewhere in there. It's definitely
right.
Beyond
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about like just the age to sign a contract.
Yeah. Well,
some kids at 16 are more than capable of comprehending the idea of a contract and what they will be.
Especially. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, especially for contracts, I do think it is more like very much an individual basis. It's like, okay, what is his cognitive function? Can he comprehend this? Is he responsible? Can they understand this contract? You know what I mean? That type of stuff. I think that's,
and the content the age of consent of the contract.
The content.
Like, is it life or death, or just like a
right.
a chore?
Sure, for sure. Yeah. So I think, go ahead.
And whose decision is it to stop me from trying to stop or encourage my kid to sign a contract?
No, that's a good point.
At what point is someone going to be like, you know what, dude, you're not doing the right thing for your kid. We need to step in here.
Yeah,
that's a really fine line.
That is one of them where it's like, I don't have a great answer for that, and quite frankly, I've never read a libertarian theorist who also has a great answer for that one either. It's like, okay, what? Obviously, we all know, like, we can all understand, like literal abuse of a child, right? Like if someone's just beating their child, obviously, you can obviously step in and stop that. But then, once you have, it gets more like ambiguous when you talk about, okay, well, if you're putting them to work a lot, at what point does that become abuse? That type of stuff. So I think those are really good, like questions about anarchism. And quite frankly, I don't have a perfect answer for that. So it's a good question, but it remains open in my opinion.
Well, I heard something on the Free Man Beyond the Wall podcast the other day. A doctor, he had written a book about the high levels of divorce because people aren't living in a tribal community.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Like, going back to the whole thing of, it takes a tribe to raise a child.
Yeah.
So like just having all those other influences could keep a parent from doing horrible things to their kids that they might not think is horrible, like getting them to sign a contract, go to war.
Right.
Yeah. But you have a support in other areas that parents don't always feel supported and don't always feel like they have the avenues to ask, or they don't want to be shamed for asking. We see that all the time because I work with child abuse victims, and I see where the parents could have been supported in other ways. They usually don't have family supports or community supports, or if those do exist, they don't know they exist until they're already in trouble.
Yeah, that's a really great point. There's certainly a lot of truth to the fact that, okay, so before the nuclear family as we understand it now, right, which is the children and then the two parents. Before that, we had most people lived in an extended family, right? So you had grandparents, you had cousins, aunts, you just had a bunch of what you would think of as the extended family, and they lived together and they supported each other. Now there are certain reasons why that kind of died out. So it died out partially naturally, but also I do think we shouldn't ignore the fact that the extended family died out due to certain circumstances that the state created. To incentivize more, like for example, the Enclosure Acts before the Industrial Revolution essentially robbed people of their property, and what that meant is that these people, the only way they could earn a living is going and working in a factory, which means they had to leave home, they had to leave their family, and they couldn't really support their extended family unless all those other people also worked in the factories too. So
nope.
Oh, I can't hear. Is someone?
It's happened again.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There you go.
Is that better? Oh, yeah, the factory wasn't letting the extended family move in either.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So these people were essentially had to go into a more nuclear family, and that's not purely natural. That is a state creation, and I do think the state. This is in line with what the state does. The state likes to fragment people. It likes to fragment them into certain little groups and boxes, and it does not like when people rely on each other. Right? The state wants you to rely on it. It does not want you to rely on your family members specifically, or even your community.
Oh, 100%. And it's very naturally done that by, we have Black Pottstown, Mexican Pottstown, White Pottstown, and then within that, different classes.
Zoning laws do this all the time.
Yep.
They're responsible for that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I always have to wonder if that's. I think sometimes it's sinister. If it's drug war stuff, it's usually pretty fucking sinister.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just stupidity.
Right. Sure.
You're just fucking up what makes people good and
right.
work.
Right. Yeah.
Never. It's so hard to tell these days what is maleficent and what is moronic, but
right. At a certain point, the line becomes very blurred. And
Porque no los dos.
What does that mean?
Why not both?
Oh shit! The fucking ad. I'm slowly assimilating to American culture.
Okay.
Let me in. All right. Anyone else have any really difficult theory questions to wrap up on?
Mel, do you have anything else?
We do have somebody asking if you could add an amendment or get rid of one. What would it be? As if that,
Okay.
really matters.
Oh,
But
man.
Ace the constitutionalist.
Okay.
It's kind of fun.
Oh, God, add an amendment or remove one. Well, if I can remove one and add one, I would remove the income tax. Okay.
That's a winner.
Yeah.
Very, very standard,
And then
yes.
I would add an amendment that the state is not allowed to monopolize security or legal proceedings, which would mean that the state would no longer be the state, and then we would have anarchism. But we wouldn't, because the state doesn't follow the Constitution, and it's all moot anyway.
Right.
They'd be like, "Oh, that's interesting." Anyway.
Yeah.
This is up for debate.
I have a question. You may have already asked it because I'm late as always. Is my style. But did anybody ask why knowing and being well versed in philosophy like this is important? Because somebody like me is not well read, and so being told why to be well read or being who to point to is important for me.
That's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good question. I think partially for me, it's more of like an obsessive thing where it's like, it's not purely like, I don't necessarily know if when I started this, I had a utility reason outside of I want to know this.
Sure.
But I do think it's important to, consider like other, like if you consider the fact that, okay, I might be wrong. Once you consider that fact, I think it's kind of important to consider that, okay, if I am wrong, how do I correct that? And I think philosophy is a good way to, entrance into that type of stuff.
Well, sounds like it brings about self-awareness.
Yeah, self-awareness is a great way. It's also philosophy is also a great way to lose your mind. So I would be careful. Because sometimes with philosophy you go looking for answers and you realize that there are no people have been doing this for hundreds and hundreds of years, and you might find the answer that no one else has, but also you might get lost like everyone else has too. So you kind of have to balance these, but I definitely think it brings about as you said, this self-awareness that's really important.
Yeah, like whenever you look at all these old men who are seeking for these answers, they're all weathered, bushy-bearded, tiny spectacled old men who look kind of like yeah, I kind of did it.
Yeah. I mean, Nietzsche's one of my favorite philosophers, and he wound up in an insane asylum. So
yeah,
touche.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's like, all right, how seriously do you take being a messenger for liberty? Are you
That's
willing
right.
Are you willing to live in a padded cell for your final years?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
I am.
Right. So crazy cat lady in the middle of the desert's not off track.
It'll kind of be comforting.
Well,
just let the state take care of me.
They won.
That'd be a fun irony. Every morning, be like, "Good morning, Razzie." Fuck you. Like,
Fuck you. Give me my food and fluffing my fucking padded cell walls.
Wipe my ass.
Wipe my ass.
Wipe my ass.
Wipe my ass, statist. I finally won.
It was taco day yesterday at the cafeteria. So.
Oh no.
Is that how we're ending?
Mel, did you say you had one more question, or did you?
Please, Mel.
No, that was it.
All right, Mel. Wait. Mel, I want you to ask me a question then.
Okay. If you could go back and assassinate one founding father.
Oh, damn.
That's a good question.
Okay.
The FBI's like, can we dock them for that?
Okay. Alexander Hamilton.
Oh, I'm with you there.
Yes. Then we wouldn't have that fucking musical.
Incite male violence.
I'm gonna steal Burr's thunder.
I like that it BR said because of the musical.
What principle alone?
The musical might be a lot better. Like he's just like thinking about like doing the Federalist shit.
That musical has negatively affected me worse than any of you. I can't sing that shit, and like, yeah. I'm all about getting rid of that musical.
Okay, so why Ace? Why Alexander Hamilton?
Because he centralized America. He created essentially this idea of a central bank. Like the idea of a central bank was really his. Like he created like the precursor to the Federal Reserve in many cases, and that is just unforgivable.
Yeah.
Alexander Hamilton, known fuckhead.
Yes.
Yeah. that was a good fucking question, a good fucking answer. I love it. All right, that's a lot better than ending on a taco night.
Well, now we are ending on taco night. Like
No. I'll dig us out of this hole. All right. Okay. Where can we find you, Ace?
You can find me on Twitter at ace_archist, and you can also find me, unfortunately, on the Slurp Gang podcast, which I co-host with my friend Khan and Jay. And yeah, we talk about the absolute most insane things, and it's you should listen and you should expect nothing from it, and we apologize in advance. Do not send us your medical bills.
I think it's really nice that you look after those two and you give them someone to talk to and a hobby.
Yeah,
you know, it's
you know, they can get pretty lonely, so I thought, okay, I'll start a podcast with you. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, we will have to have something to do. But,
that's right. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, man. It's been a
thanks so much for inviting me. This was great.
It's been a ride. I knew it would be. I was like, from the second I got on Twitter, I saw you starting to pop up. I was like, all right, someday I gotta like make it not weird and like know enough about you to get you on. And after Childerberg, I was like, all right, finally we can do this thing proper.
Man, it was great meeting you at Childerberg too. It was real fun.
Oh fuck yeah! And I'm gonna Resi Buckles. Mel, I'm gonna try and drag you down, kicking and screaming if I have to.
I feel offended that you feel like you're carrying me, but I also feel I'm glad. Thank you.
We're gonna
carry me along.
You know what? I was really jealous of all these guys recording live podcasts at Childerberg. I was like, all right, I'm not recording an episode on my own, so yeah, we're doing it live next year.
I wanted to come this year, and I just. Like everything.
Shout out to
so
Childerberg.
fast.
Childerberg was great this year, and it's going to be even better next year.
Absolutely. And next episode, I'm going to have Spirit Resistance, Typo from Biting the Bullet, Jacob, organizer of Childerberg, and also host of Tasting Anarchy and California in Exile. Going to have all those. Oh, and Sassy's Raiders. To talk about our experience at Childerberg, because we have to do an after action report for all the Instagram people. Yes, because I did my solo one just talking about tripping and all my hippie shit. So so I need to do some with some people who weren't high like the entire time. So that'll be just SOR. And Jacob. Anyway, thanks guys for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.